In a world stage filled with giants, few expected Portugal to make noise. But in 2023, they showed up and they showed the world that they belong. This is the story of a team that fought to exist, fought to qualify, and now fights to inspire. Welcome to Beyond the Playbook, and in today's episode, we will be taking a look at Portugal. The Portugal women's national team played its first official match in 1981 against France, and they lost 1-0. For the next few decades, the program remained in the shadows. Poor investment, lack of visibility, and deep rooted gender bias meant that progress was very slow. And it wasn't until the 2010s that Portugal started investing more seriously in the women's game. A domestic league structure began to improve. Young players were coming through academies with better support systems, and the game gradually began to grow. In 2017, Portugal made its first ever appearance at a major tournament in the Women's Euros in Netherlands. They were in the same group as England, Spain, and Scotland, and they weren't expected to get out of that group, and they didn't. But a 2-1 win against Scotland was a statement. Portugal was no longer a minnow, they were a work in progress. And this was a turning point. Domestically, the Campeonato Nacional Feminino began seeing clubs like Benfica and Sporting investing more in women's football, leading to better conditions and more visibility. But the real breakthrough came in 2023. Portugal qualified for its first ever FIFA Women's World Cup, and they did it the hard way. They had to go through intercontinental playoffs and won against Cameroon in a 2-1 game. It was a nail biter that took place in Hamilton in New Zealand. Telma, Encarnação, and Diana Gomez were the heroes that day. And the win was more than just a qualification. It was a symbol of decades of persistence finally paying off. Portugal was placed in the group of death at the World Cup. They had the USA that were reigning champions, and they had Netherlands, the runners-up from 2019, and Vietnam. Everyone expected Portugal to come last, but they didn't. They beat Vietnam 2-1, marking their first ever World Cup win, and they held the mighty USA to a 0-0 draw. And if a shot in stoppage time had gone in, Portugal actually could have knocked the USA out. It didn't, but that result was very historic. They finished third in that group with 4 points and left the tournament with their heads held high. One of the brightest stars of Portugal's World Cup run was Telma Encarnação, a 21-year-old forward from Madeira. Telma became the first Portuguese woman to score in a FIFA World Cup. But beyond her goal against Vietnam, it was her work rate, her grit, and her infectious energy that won the fans. She started playing for Maritimo women's team when she was 14. And in a country where male players dominate headlines, Telma's emergence offered a new kind of hero for the next generation. Another player that we can focus on is Kika Nazareth. She's one of Portugal's brightest stars. She signed for Barcelona in July of 2024 for about 500,000 euros, a record fee for Portuguese women's football. And she's already won the Spanish Super Cup and she's won the Liga F title. And she scored early on in the season as well, but a serious injury in January halted her run. At Benfica, she was central in a historic quadruple, winning the League Cup, and the Super Cup in the 2023-24 season, which was a first in Portugal's women's game. And she featured in about 37 matches, scored about 25 goals, and got about 8 or 9 assists. Her rise inspired Visa to appoint her Team Visa ambassador for the Portuguese Women's League, highlighting her role as a role model and helping grow the profile of the league across Portugal. In the Women's Euros of 2025, Portugal was placed in a group along with Spain, Belgium, and Italy. Their first game was a little difficult to play with, marred by the sudden tragic death of Diogo Jota and his brother Andre Silva. So Portuguese, in a very emotionally laden match, they faced Spain. They lost 5-0, but the fans showed up. They brought the energy and they kept the girls going. They held Italy to a 1-1 draw, and they needed a win in their next game to actually push for the knockouts, but unfortunately lost. However, they left this tournament with a lot more experience, a lot more eyes on them, and even higher expectations for the next tournament. And in this competitive group with stars like Telma, Kika, Jessica Silva, there was genuine belief that this could be their best showing yet. It wasn't to be, but it genuinely brought a lot of hope for their fans. Portugal still has work to do. They are currently ranked outside the top 20 in the FIFA rankings. But with talents like Telma, Kika Nazareth, Andrea Norton, and a growing fan base, the future looks promising. More investment, more visibility, and consistent youth development could make Portugal a regular feature at Euros and at World Cups. And then not just as underdogs, but actually as contenders. So if you like this episode of Portugal, please leave a like, a comment, and do subscribe. Thank you.